So today I've came to the University of Cincinnati's campus here right in downtown Cincinnati, and today I'm going to be checking out Gettler Stadium. The story of Cincinnati soccer, at least the University of Cincinnati soccer, is that of the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm going to get into all three today, and I'm going to tell you the story about Gettler Stadium. The University of Cincinnati is a public research university in Cincinnati, Ohio. It was founded in 1819 as Cincinnati College, so over 200 years ago. It is the oldest institution of higher education in Cincinnati and has an annual enrollment of 44,000 students, making it the second largest university in Ohio. I assume that Ohio State is the first largest. Okay, so Gettler Stadium here on the campus of the University of Cincinnati. It was opened in 2006, and it was given as a gift of recognition by Ben and Dee Gettler to the Varsity Village here. So this is the sports area that I was talking about. It's called the Varsity Village. They've had a couple renovations since then, which laid the field turf and the floodlights up there. It is in the shadow of Calhoun Hall right there. You could see the parking structure. And one thing that I've always said that I really like about college stadiums is that they're all so unique. There's not one or two different versions like in MLS or in the new stadiums they're building in Europe. So one thing I really like is the parking structure kind of overlooking everything. I also really like these old stands right here. You can see how faded and worn out they are. It was only built, what, 15 years ago, and it already looks like it's been around for 100 years. So at the beginning of my video, I told you guys that I wanted to do the good, the bad, and the ugly here at Cincinnati. So let's start off with the bad. And the bad, in this case, would be the men's program. So the men's program was founded in 1973. They played here at Gettler Stadium, and they had an all-time record of 385 wins, 408 losses, and 84 ties. The best season that the men ever had would be back in 1989. That's actually my birth year. They had the most wins, which was 14. They went 14, 4-1, and it was their only conference title win. Conference regular season title win, I'm sorry. And at the time, they played in a conference called the Big Central Soccer Conference. And over time, over their almost 50-year history, they would play in 5 conferences: the Big Central, the Great Midwest, Conference USA, the Big East, and the last conference that they played in, which was the AAC, the American Athletic Conference. And they only made the tournament 3 times. And all 3 times, they bowed out in the first round. The first time in 1998, they lost in double overtime to Butler, 1-0. In 2003, they lost on penalty kicks to their rival to the south, Kentucky, 0-0. The game finished 0-0, and they lost on penalty kicks. And then in 2006, the last time they made the tournament, they lost to Northwestern, 3-0. So 3 appearances, 3 losses, unfortunately. One thing positive that I will say about their program, though, when I was looking up their history, and I don't know, maybe this is a bad thing considering how they hadn't really performed well over 50 years. They only had 5 coaches in their 47-year history. So I guess you can say that's really good for continuity, but then again, with how bad they are, maybe they should have changed coaches a couple more times. So that's the bad part of the story. The ugly part of the story is how their program came to an end. So for the unfortunate, ugly part of the story that I'm about to tell you. So we all obviously had to deal with the COVID pandemic in 2020. It hit a lot of people hard. It hit a lot of financial institutions hard. One of those teams and one of those entities was the UC men's soccer program. Unfortunately, it did not survive COVID. On April 14th, 2020, the University of Cincinnati athletic director, John Cunningham, announced that UC was discontinuing its men's soccer program after almost 50 years. It's a very sad situation. Kind of appropriate that the dongs are going off in the background. You know, the way this stadium is shaped, it kind of reminds me of like one of those stadiums in Spain or Portugal when the field is right in the middle of like all the buildings. You know, in Spain or Portugal, there's not a lot of room left to build just open stadiums, so they have to build them kind of all in the middle of like parking structures and businesses. Kind of reminds me of that. Surrounded on three corners by buildings. Over here it's open though. Like all the trees surrounding it. Looks very beautiful. And Nippert Stadium right in the background. So we already ticked off the bad and the ugly. Let's finish off on a positive note and talk about the good, which is the women's program here at Cincinnati. So the women's team started way back in 1978. And they didn't start here at Gettler. They actually started across the street over here at Nippert Stadium. And this was way back in the day when women's sports unfortunately did not have a lot of funding. So the women, listen to some of the stuff that they had to do. They would have to play on fields that were really, you know, rough and nasty. They didn't get to play on nice field turf like this or actual grass. They didn't even have proper nutrition. They would have to go and eat like McDonald's and La Rosa's Pizza in downtown Cincinnati just to get some nutrition. And obviously, you know, they were college students. They did not have a lot of money to buy equipment and stuff. I remember I heard a story from one of the coaches. He said that he would hunt his players down just to get their socks back. I mean, there was so little money put into the program at the beginning that these women just had to find a piece of grass and any piece of food just to eat and just to get by. But they would end up coming out stronger in a time when college soccer was dominated by one program, and that was the University of North Carolina. But Cincinnati, their women found their own little niche, and they ended up, let's see here, they ended up making the NCAA tournament for the first time back in 1983. So again, this was a time when women's college soccer was dominated by the University of North Carolina, and everyone else was kind of just along for the ride. Their first appearance, they lost to California 5-0, but they finished that year 12-1-3. Their success would continue on from there a couple years later when they finished 13-2-1, but unfortunately they lost to another team from California in UC Santa Barbara 1-0. So it's kind of interesting because usually in the NCAA tournament we like to regionalize things, so you play teams more local. But the first 2 years they lost to teams from Cali. Then the next year, the next time they made it would be 1994, and they lost 3-2 in triple overtime to Vanderbilt. That year they actually finished with their most wins up to that point with 15. They went 15-4-2. So back then we did not do shootouts, we just kept going into overtime, and that game went to triple overtime. Then in 1997 they finally broke through with their first NCAA tournament win. They beat Georgia State 2-1 in overtime in a play-in game. That year they topped their wins total again by finishing 16-4-3, and they won the Conference USA tournament. They unfortunately would lose to Notre Dame 7-1. They were thrashed by the Fighting Irish in the next round. However, 2001 and 2002 would finally be the breakthrough year in terms of success and in terms of tournament winning for the UC women's team. So in 2001, just checking out the field here. So in 2001, the women went 18-3. No draws, they had 18 wins. That year, they beat Oakland, the county that I'm from, 3-2 in the first round. They then got revenge on Notre Dame for that 7-1 thrashing. And they beat them 3-2 in the second round. And then they made it all the way to the third round, which I think is the last 8. I think it's the last 8. It could be the last 16, I'm not sure. But they made it all the way to the third round where they lost to Virginia, unfortunately, 4-0. This is their logo right at center field. You can see the buildings off in the distance here. And this is the logo. The big C, the big paw for the Bearcat. Bearcats are real animals, by the way. Beautiful shot. Gettler in the background, the scoreboard, basketball arena. You can see the old buildings off in the distance there. Beautiful day out here. So the very next year, in 2002, they went 16-3-3, so not as many wins. However, in the first round, they beat Kentucky 1-0, who Kentucky is a rival of Cincinnati's. It's just to the south here. But then unfortunately, they lost 2-1 to Tennessee in the next round. And they have not been able to replicate that success since then. The only time that they've made the tournament since then is 2015, when they lost in the first round to Virginia Tech. So at least the women have been able to carry on some success here for soccer on the University of Cincinnati. You can see some of the wear on this stadium, which is kind of crazy because it's only, what, like 15 years old? I do like it though. It's just like 5 rows. You know, if you would have came here about 6 years ago, there was 3 programs playing here. You had FC Cincinnati playing off at Nippert, and you had the men's and the women's program playing here at Gettler. Unfortunately, FC Cincinnati moved off to TQL, and the men's program folded. So now, the women are the only ones that represent the beautiful game here on the University of Cincinnati's campus. Keep holding it down, girls.